Awesome, awesome. Hi, everybody. I am Gretchen Dawson. I'm with 3D Theatricals, and of course, this is 3D+U. We are bringing as much free content as we can to you guys during this crazy quarantine time. And the class that we have going on today is just awesome. This is a very dear friend of mine who I met actually in a sketch comedy group that we were a part of, Fred Willard's sketch comedy group called the Mohos, and we were a part of that group. I actually see Mitch on here as well.
Hi, Mitch.
Hi, Mitch. And yeah, it was just a really great time. We got to perform at many different locations, including Second City. But John has been a part of the sketch comedy group for a little over 25 years now, and wrote in Mad TV, has written for, was a part of the Groundlings, and has also written for Jimmy Neutron, Rocket Power, and Cat Dog. Just a plethora of wonderful, wonderful shows. And we're just so thankful that John took his time and is able to bring you his knowledge and wisdom when it comes to sketch comedy. So please give a big round of applause, virtual round of applause for John Gray.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hey guys, first of all, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today and taking time out of your busy workload at home, whatever that might be, to join us. I've got a little, we're going to start out with, I've got a keynote set up, which actually we'll talk a little bit. I've got a, we'll get into a little bit about me and also a little fun fact about me that people that I don't even think Gretchen knows. Maybe Mitch knows. Maybe I've shared this with Mitch, but let me go ahead and share my screen. See, where are you? Here we go. Nope. All right. Everybody have it? Okay, great.
Yes.
Okay, so first thing here is, oh wait, shoot, sorry guys, hold on. I've got the wrong keynote. Sorry, I'm gonna stop share. I had the keynote open. This is the one that works inside of the Safari browser, which the other one is a little weird. So let me try again.
Been there.
Yep.
The magic of Zoom.
I know. This is the one. Okay. So as Gretchen mentioned, these are some of the shows, basically when we start out in sketch comedy, I started out at the Groundlings, here in Los Angeles, which is this great training ground for not only performers, certainly a lot of performers have come out of the Groundlings, but for writers and producers as well. It's a really great way to sort of jump into sketch comedy, learn about it, learn about improv, and learn about writing. I also came out first as an actor. I was in a sketch show called Roundhouse on Nickelodeon. Some of you recognize it. Yeah, I was actually the dad that drove around in the chair on Roundhouse. There's a picture of me there. So for that show, we were writing and performing on Roundhouse. And sketch comedy, a lot of people who write in sketch transition into animation because sketch is a short form medium. So you'll find that there are a lot of people who write sketches, because sketches are 3 to 4 minutes long. And of course, animation, lots of it is 15 minutes long. So there are a lot of people who have sketch training who transition into animation. And I certainly did a lot of that. As Gretchen mentioned, Johnny Bravo, Rocket Power, Cat Dog, Jimmy Neutron, the LeBrons, which was this web series that LeBron had. And then Mad TV. Yes, I was on Mad TV as the head writer and executive producer in varying degrees for about 10 years on that show. The show ran for 14. This little picture of me is a character that I created at the Groundlings called Choppy. And it's one of the ones I am not crazy about pictures of myself. So this one is one of my favorites just because it doesn't look like me. All right, so that's about me. Now the fun fact, here's the fun fact. The fun fact is I was actually the green screen Bugs Bunny for Space Jam. And it's so funny because
John! Sorry, that's so cool.
This was actually a lot of fun. This was a great shoot, and I'm actually behind on The Last Dance, which is ESPN's story on Michael Jordan. But they actually, I think last night or 2 nights ago, did about 10 minutes of the documentary on Space Jam, and we're in it in our green suits running around. They have some old clips there. But this was great. And the thing about the sort of blessing and the curse is that because I was Bugs Bunny, I'm in almost every scene in that movie. And of course, I'm not in every scene in that movie because I was replaced by animation. But anyway, it was great fun. And also a lot of improvisers. There were a couple of other groundlings who worked with us on that shoot too. So great fun. Just a quick little added thing. I'm not a huge basketball fan. I grew up in New Orleans. We didn't have a big basketball team when I was growing up, a big New Orleans Saints fan. But I've now worked with 2 of arguably the best players ever to play the game, LeBron James and Michael Jordan. And I sort of wish I was a bigger fan. But anyway, so that's a little fun fact about me. All right, let's get into sketch writing. We're going to take a look at, this is just going to be kind of a basic overview of sketch and some of the really important elements. I know that a lot of people, when you think about sketch comedy, the first thing that people obviously zero in on is comedy, how to be funny, how to write funny. And the thing that I always say is that, any class that you take for writing is not going to teach you how to be funny. Really, what it's designed to do is bring whatever sense of humor you have in yourself out onto the page. Find that sense, because we're all going to assume that you have a sense of humor. We certainly hope so. And so the writing it is about exposing and expressing your own sense of humor. So let's start basically with what are the few sort of basic elements of a sketch. The first one, quite obviously, is that it's a short piece that stands on its own. It's not a scene from a movie. It's not a piece that actually moves, that is, it's not a piece of a larger piece that's moving a story forward in bits and pieces. It's one fully written piece that stands on its own, beginning to end. And that's important too, because that gets you starting to think in terms of story, which is another important element. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The other important thing is it's heightened reality. The other thing about sketch is that, like, for instance, if you look at this picture that I have here, this is a character called Gilly, Kristen Wiig's character Gilly. And you can see by the outfit and the facial expression, this is a very big character. But if you know anything about the character and you've seen a sketch, it's still based in reality. It's heightened, yes, but this sort of outlier character, the best sketches, the strongest sketches have a behavior that we can identify with. We go, yeah, I know this girl. I don't know her in this size. I don't know her in this heightened way, but I recognize that behavior and that little mischievous look and the little girl who's got a little mischievousness about her. So it's reality, but it's heightened. So the important thing is that it is based in something real so that we as the audience can connect to it. Because if it's too far out there, or if it's not based in anything real, in anything real, then for an audience, the audience feels a little bit unstable. They don't quite know what the writer is going for. They don't know what the performance is going for. So it has to be something that we recognize as real, something that we recognize in our own lives. As I mentioned for the short piece, it's a complete story. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And a lot of times, especially when people first start writing, they don't think in terms of beginning, middle, and end. Most of the times when we write comedy, we just think of I want it to just be as funny as it possibly can be. But the truth is that the story is what is going to drive your sketch. So you've got to have a beginning, middle, and end. And if we're going to look at a few sketches here, and you'll start to notice, because you presumably be paying attention to it, how the story begins, what happens in the middle, and how the story ends. So there is a story arc there that sketch writers are trying to complete. It has a very explicit point of view. This is really important because as writers, when you sit down to write a sketch, and as I said, very often it comes from a funny idea or a funny thought, what angle are you taking to express it in its strongest form? You know, the little example that I use is the old knock knock joke. You know that there's a knock knock joke that goes knock knock, who's there? Banana, banana who? Knock knock, who's there? Banana, banana who? Knock knock, who's there? Orange, orange who? Aren't you glad I didn't say banana? Okay, so let's just pretend that that's the best joke you've ever heard and that it's really, really funny. Well, if the punchline is, aren't you glad I didn't say banana? And I said, I've got this really great, funny idea. And the punchline is, aren't you glad I didn't say banana? The work that we have to do now is set that up so that you get it. It's the setup to the joke. And sketches need to be set up in a way that we get it. So a lot of times we'll come up with a funny idea. We'll see somebody in a coffee shop that's behaving in a funny way, or we'll hear a line and we go, okay, so I have my funny thing. I have my thing that's funny. Now, how do I set it up in such a way that my audience gets the joke, that they understand knock, knock, who's there? Knock, knock, who's there is what we have to do as writers to help sell that point of view so that it's funny. Because without it, the audience doesn't know what the setup is. The audience doesn't know where you're going. What's your angle? What is your point of view? So it's really important to have that. And usually sketches, because they're short, they're about one thing. They're about one specific kind of behavior. You know, Gilly, if you've seen Gilly's sketches, there's a certain behavior that Kristen Wiig's character is you know, exploring and unpacking, but it's about one thing. Same thing in, if you see a sketch that has not a character sketch, but a funny situation, it's usually about exploring and unpacking what happens inside of this funny situation. And that can be tricky too for writers when we're starting out too, because you go, well, this is a funny idea and this is a funny idea, and that may very, very well be true. But when you have two funny ideas that you're trying to accomplish inside of one sketch, they dilute both of them. They can compromise both of them. So part of the work is to really focus on, what's this one thing that I'm going for? What's the one thing that I want this sketch to be about? The one funny thing. Okay. So there are three basic types of sketches. They generally fall into one of these three categories. Character-based sketch, which, you know, are characters that we see a lot on Saturday Night Live. Kristen Wiig's Gilly is a character sketch. A premise-based sketch, which is the comedy comes out of what's funny or the situation. And a parody sketch, which is taking a genre or something that's familiar to the culture and taking a spin on it, taking some sort of a different kind of a take. Again, all inside of this heightened reality kind of way, especially with parody, because the reality is, for instance, you know, we know these characters. We know who Trump is, so that when Alec Baldwin does him on SNL, we have a reference to it. So let's talk quickly about character-based first. Character-based sketches focus on who is funny rather than what is funny. Character-based sketches are about funny people versus a funny situation. And that's where all the comedy is coming from. Usually what it is the scene takes place in a normal, grounded world where the character or the behavior is the abnormal element. You know, we've seen, if you start looking at character sketches from this angle, you'll notice that generally, not always, certainly this isn't a hard and fast rule, but 98, 99% of the time, there's a normal person who is experiencing the big, broad character. The guy on the plane who just wants to sit and read his article, and he's sitting next to a big, wacky character who wants to talk to him or her. You know, we're going to look at a character, Debbie Downer. You know, the person who just wants to have a good time, and Debbie Downer just keeps bringing them down, just keeps reminding them that the world is a terrible place and it's a bummer to be alive. So inside of a character-based sketch, the world is normal, but the character is the absurd thing in it. And the behavior is the absurd thing in it. And then the emotional journey belongs to the straight man or woman inside the character facing the abnormal character. And we'll talk about why the journey for the straight man or woman or group of people, that's what your sketch is about, actually. It's about their journey, where they are at the beginning of the story. Remember, we're telling a story. Once upon a time, there was a man who met a crazy character in a coffee shop. Then this happened, and at the end, the man stormed out. So it's the man's story. It's their journey. So we're exploring the emotional journey of the people that are experiencing the characters. And that's important to really get a hold of when you're starting to write sketches. Whose story am I telling here? Because a lot of times you'll go, well, it's the character story. Well, it's actually not. And one of the reasons too is because the character's behavior is consistent. The character doesn't change. That's why they're called recurring characters, because they're always the same when we see them. They don't change. They're the consistent thing in the sketch. Okay. So let's look at, first we're going to look at this character-based sketch. This is a sketch that they did on SNL called Debbie Downer. Track the story, track the behavior, and see if you can recognize, again, what makes this a character sketch as opposed to a situation. So it's funny because they obviously do a lot of breaking in that scene. But it's actually structurally, and believe it or not, that sketch is 5 pages long. It's only 5 pages long, but of course they're with laughs and they're breaking and all of that kind of stuff that, it expands into this, this bigger thing. But structurally, especially as a character sketch, you start to see that the story is about the family. Like if I were to say, most people you to say, what's that sketch about? You would probably, as an observer, as an audience member, zero on, oh, it's about this girl who keeps saying this stuff that bums everybody out. But actually, as a writer, you want to think in terms of, it's actually about the family who goes to Disneyland and wants to have a great time, but their time is ruined by this person who keeps raining on their parade. So that's what's actually the story is about. And that's the knock part that sets up the Debbie Downer, Debbie Downer is the joke. Her lines are the punchlines, and the setups are, we can't wait to have a good time. Debbie Downer is the punchline to those setups. So let's look at now what makes that's a character sketch. Let's look at what makes a premise-based sketch is obviously the opposite of a character sketch in that it focuses on what is funny rather than who is funny. What is the situation? A normal character experiences, instead of a character that's abnormal or that's huge or that's abnormal, it's the situation. So and by the way, when we say normal character, what we're really saying there is a character that presents the audience, that presents us with a way into the sketch. They're essentially quote normal character is us in the sketch. So we see a normal person reacting very much more or less in the way that we would react to that crazy character. More or less in the Debbie Downer character, people get upset with her. You're bringing me down. Stop it. I'm just here to have fun. That's more or less how we would get in a heightened reality of someone who keeps just telling us how bad things are. We might get fed up and say, that's it. I've had enough. So a normal character is somebody like us who is experiencing this abnormal situation. In this picture that I have here, this is a scene from an SNL sketch where Taran Killam's character, the guy in the peach shirt, he's meeting his boyfriend's family, the guy sitting next to him, and the family is very affectionate with each other, where they actually kiss each other in inappropriate ways. And so it's taking this sort of familiar experience. We probably all experienced, being with, whether it be friends or a couple or someone who's a little bit too physically affectionate in front of us or a little bit inappropriate in front of us, and we're experiencing the uncomfortableness of that. That's what this sketch is playing into. That's basically a premise. The premise is one day a guy goes in and meets his boyfriend's family who are very touchy-feely with each other, overly so, in an abnormal, heightened way. So still based in reality, but very big in a very heightened kind of situation. So it's a normal character experiencing the world or a situation that's abnormal. And the emotional journey belongs to the character facing that situation. So again, just like in the Debbie Downer sketch, the family is facing the abnormal character. Here, there's a character in the scene that's facing this abnormal world or this situation. So I'm going to look at a premise-based sketch now. This one is one we did for Mad TV with, sure many of you know that Key and Peele started on Mad TV. And this was a sketch they did on that show. So again, if you were to say, what's that sketch about? It's actually about Keegan's character, who's the gang leader, because he's experiencing this strange fight with Jordan's character. So, and by the way, he's the one that takes the emotional journey, right? I mean, they kind of both do, but when you look at, you know, Keegan's character, he's confused. You know, he starts off, you look at his journey, at first he's confused. The expectation is that this is going to be a real dog fight. This is going to be a real fight on the street. Then he starts fighting him in this strange way. He gets confused. He's trying to understand what's happening. And in the end, he finally does, you know, and we find out that they had this relationship beforehand. So again, that's a premise sketch. It's a situation. It's a strange situation that this character is being put in. It's an abnormal situation, and he's the one who takes the journey. All right, so quickly, let's look at parody sketches. And parody sketches are basically an imitation of a particular artist, a medium, or a genre with deliberate exaggeration of comedic effect. And we've seen, you know, again, especially now because it's been, you know, such a politically charged environment right now. We're seeing lots of parody involving politicians, you know, involving leaders, you know, all kinds of things. It's basically, and one of the reasons that's happening is because it's very much in the public consciousness right now. So that's what makes parody really ripe. I mean, parody has, you know, essentially parody sketches have, in general, a shorter shelf life because they basically target things that are happening right now. That's not to say that they all do, because, you know, you could have a commercial parody. Commercials last for a while. A TV parody, you know, for TV shows. But essentially, the comedy relies on the audience's familiarity with the subject matter. So as I said, so something that's happening now, you know, if you were writing a parody for SNL, let's say, or, you know, even sketch shows or sketches appear on talk shows, you'd want to appeal to the broadest audience. So you would want to find subject matter that you're pretty sure most of the people watching the show will have a reference for. You know, years ago when I was working at the Groundlings, we'd get hired to write sketches and do shows for particular businesses. So what we do is we'd, you know, explore the business. We'd find out who were the sort of main characters inside of the business that the audience knew and were familiar with, the president of the company, the CEO, whoever it was, and we do a parody of them that would appeal obviously to that audience because they were familiar with it, but not necessarily anybody else outside of the company. So those were actually they didn't run them back to back on SNL. They ran them at different times throughout the show, which was why too that, you know, that last one was really, really effective because it looked like a commercial, it looked like a parody, another parody of Allstate. And it was, you know, again, it was not, they didn't run them all, so you weren't looking for it. And so it was really a great laugh and a great surprise when he gets run over by the car and the big reveal of Matthew McConaughey's character, you know, with the tie on his head and his shirt off. So really quickly, I'll talk about a few other elements and then we'll open up to questions too. But as I had mentioned before, story is that container that holds the comedy in the sketch. So story is really important. It's that structure. It's the knock-knock structure. Identify who your sketch is about. Who is the sketch happening to? It's what we talked about. Who is it happening to? Who's experiencing the character or the situation in the scene? What is your main character's journey? You know, in the story, basically, a way to think about it when you're writing is, does my character get a win or a loss at the end? You know, you know, if the character's journey in the gang fight was he's confused. So if he starts off confused, does he end up, what, you know, the journey is from confused to understanding. So he starts off confused. He doesn't know what's going on. The comedy happens in the middle that tells the story. And by the end, he finally understands what's going on. That's his journey. And while that's not, if you would express that to somebody, you would say, well, sure, that's fine. Doesn't sound particularly funny. Well, that's right, because it's just the story that carries the funny. But you got to have it, because if you don't have it, then we as the audience are not going to be as invested in your sketch, and we're not going to know where you're going with it. There's nothing underneath that's just driving the scene forward. So that's what you want to do when you're building a story. Really quickly too, the story arcs for each of these sketches. The premise: Disneyland diner family looks forward to a fun day at Disneyland. What happens? Debbie Downer rains on their parade. How does it end? Do the main characters get what they want? No, Debbie dashes their hopes for a good time. So they were hopeful, and now at the end, they're hopeless. They were excited, now they're not excited. That's the journey of the characters in that scene. So same thing for Gang Up. In an alley, a gang leader is confused by an underling's bizarre street fighting techniques. What happens? The gang leader tries to understand what's happening to him. How does it end? Does the main character get what he wants? Yes. The gang leader understands why the underling is behaving so badly. So he comes to an understanding after the end. That's the journey. Some quick examples of escalations and heightening in scenes. I can't really get into all of these things in detail right here, but just, whoops, I went backwards. Sorry, hang on one second. Sorry guys, can't go back. Gotta get back. Here we go. So these are just the things that you would use to get your sketch moving forward. Dialogue. Oh, sorry, something is locked on my screen and it's okay. Sorry. I think hopefully it'll stop after this. But very quickly, dialogue and revelations, which essentially, how does your scene progress? Through dialogue. That's an obvious one. As people speak, they reveal things about themselves. They're telling the story. We learn about the story through dialogue. Jokes are obviously part of dialogue. So that's one way that the story builds. Emotional beats. We saw emotional beats in both those scenes. In Debbie Downer, the family goes from really being excited to being angry, right? There's a moment where Lindsay Lohan's character stands up and says, "You've ruined my time here." So there's a progression of emotion inside of the sketch. Entrances and exits. In the Debbie Downer sketch, Pluto comes in. She doesn't just deal with the family. She deals with Pluto. So when you're writing a sketch and you run into a wall, a lot of times it's like, who could enter my scene to give it some energy? Who can I bring into the scene? And obviously you don't want it to be arbitrary. You want it to be some, a character or an element that's already inside your scene. Like if you're at Disneyland, Pluto is a very organic way of having somebody enter. Physical beats. Obviously, physical beats were used in the gang fight. It's a very physical sketch, right? So those are ways that you can get at your comedic premise. Raising the stakes, raising the absurdity level. We saw that too in both those sketches, where the stakes are the family really wants to have a good time. They've been waiting. There's lines in there where they've been waiting for months and months to have this family reunion. So there's expectation. There are stakes at play there for them. That helps your scene move forward. And then environmental beats, using your location. You think about it, the location, again, for Debbie Downer, if I have a character that is cynical, that's skeptical, that's kind of dark, how can I heighten that? We talked about heightened realities. What's the best, or what is one of the ways I can heighten that? And the way you can do it is through contrast, right? Because if I have a dark character, what's the brightest, happiest place in the world I can put her? Disneyland. Now you are real. And what I'm doing is I'm really showing you my point of view. My point of view is this depressed character. So I'm putting her, if you noticed, they even put her in a brown shirt. And Disneyland, everybody else is in these bright pastel colors, and she's the brown color in the color wheel. Using your location to serve your premise, it's another way of serving that joke. And then finally, your resolution. We talked a little bit about this. How does your resolution resolve your premise? Is it a win or a loss for your characters? And the blackout essentially is your final comedic line or beat of the sketch. So that's the overall, look. Again, it's really important. It's the structural part. It's the foundation part of, any sketch that you write. And once you get an understanding of this, then what's really great is that if you have a good understanding and you get a good grasp and a good level of competency with it, then you can start laying on your sense of humor, your point of view, what is funny to you, what made you think of the premise or the character in the first place. These things here and these elements here are really going to help, really going to help your sketch be strong, be successful. The one thing I always say that comedy is very elusive, right? It's something that you can't just, it's art. So it's not a perfect science. But so in the end, it's okay if somebody says, hey, I saw your sketch and I didn't think it was that funny. That's okay. That's okay. What you don't want is, hey, I saw your sketch and I had no idea what you were going for. That's what you don't want. It's okay to write, because again, we all, believe me, I have written many awful, terrible sketches and still do. Even though because it's art, it's elusive. It's not this perfect science. But what I feel pretty confident about is that if you were to read any of my sketches, and even the ones that I go, hey, yeah, this just didn't come out the way I'd want, I think you'd be able to say, yeah, I know what you were heading for. I know what you were trying to do there. Just didn't make me laugh. Which, like I said, that's a whole nother conversation we talk about in the classes too, is that's the cost of doing business. And, as soon as we recognize that, and as soon as we go, yeah, okay, it's a matter of fact, this last card that I have here, which I've always loved, Ernest Hemingway's quote, "There's nothing to writing. All you do is sit down at a typewriter and bleed." And to me, there's such truth to that. And not that it should be discouraging to any of you who want to write. To me, it's as soon as you accept that it is tough. And there are going to be days when you bleed at your typewriter, but there are going to be days when you get that one great line or two lines, a nice setup and nice joke, that they come together. And I don't play golf, but people have talked about the first time you hit a clean golf swing and ball goes straight down the fairway. There's this feeling that you get when you go, I like that and I want that, but you're going to have to hit another 10,000 bad ones into the woods and shank and hook and all that kind of stuff. But that one that you hit cleanly is the one that keeps you going. So for writers, as soon as we are able to understand that and accept it, that's the cost of doing business, we can get on with our writing and get better at our writing too.
Well, John, we're getting to the end of our session time, but why don't we take a couple questions?
Sure.
I'm just looking through the chat. Jennifer wants to know if there's a way to show the building story slide once more before the class ends.
Yeah, let's see if I can, and I'll go back to, let me go back to the screen.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Okay. Let me see if I can
and also while John's finding that, I just wanted to mention to follow John on his Instagram. I put that in the chat. It should be at the top of the chat if you want to follow him there. And John, you said you had another way of maybe doing more classes or anything you want to mention?
Yeah, thank you. If you go to cranesketch.com, there's some online class. We just started some online. We're in the process now of doing one called Character in Place, which has actually been a lot of fun. The writers are writing sketches that we're shooting at home. They're going to actually self-shoot the sketches. We're writing them, we're rewriting them, polishing them, and then they're shooting them. And then we're going to put them together in what we're going to call a Character in Place show that we'll put on the website for anybody who wants to come and check them out.
That's a cool idea. I love that.
So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's a little bit of an exploration because I've not done it before, but so far everybody seems to be enjoying it. We were doing another class before the outbreak where we were going to perform live, And actually Mitch, I don't know if Mitch is still here, but Mitch helped me out on that, where we wrote, because I really, one of the things that I love is the completion of the process, which is writing your sketches and then performing them. I do teach writing classes where we're simply writing, which I think is valuable. But I also think, you know, as writers, it's a really valuable experience to have your material put up on its feet in some sense. Not, you know, we're not able to, you know, we go to a theater and we do the show. We're not able to fully prop or fully wardrobe pieces, but we get, you know, all you need really is just some minimalist pieces and suggesting props to get your scene across. But it's to me, it's great for writers to be able to do that, to complete that process. So character in places.
I see Nancy has a question. Let me unmute you. There you go, Nancy.
Oh, hey, yeah, thank you. Hi. So I had, well, actually, just two questions. One, talking about exactly what you're talking about now, aren't you kind of at the mercy of the performers who are going to be doing it? Because even I love Saturday Night Live, I always have. And sometimes you have some guest stars who really aren't very good. But, and then the sketches really don't go anywhere. And I don't, you know, it's hard to know whether or not it's the writing or it's the performer. So can you speak to that? I mean, that's kind of frustrating, I can imagine, because something funny and they just don't know what to do with it, you know?
Yeah, well, you know, it's funny, you know, in all my years on Mad TV, one of the things that you really come to understand very quickly, that you sort of have to remember, is in the end, right, it's art. And so, for instance, there would be times when we would take a sketch to the table that we thought, this is killer. This is going to be great. Everybody who's read it loves it. And it gets to the table, and there's an interpretation by an actor or an actress that they just have a different take on it, just like any actor or actress would, and it falls on its face. By the same token, actors can really bring mediocre writing to, we saw that too. We saw sketches where you kind of go, well, you know, the deadline, the bell rang, you know, pencils down, let me hand in the sketch. And then all of a sudden an actor gets a hold of it and has a take on it that you maybe didn't perceive or anticipate. And the thing just comes to life. It's a really hard thing to pinpoint. I'll say this, you know, for character sketches are primarily written by the people who perform them. Well, let me put it this way. In establishing new characters, once a character is established, once Debbie Downer is established and other writers go, okay, I know what you're going for, then other writers can write for that character. But essentially, characters are developed by the people who write them because they have an intrinsic sense about the characters and how they're going to perform it. You know, Kristen Wiig has this character Penelope. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but you know, she's got these little verbal tics and these mannerisms that she uses that you couldn't write. You really couldn't write. As a matter of fact, if you tried to write all the little tics and mannerisms, you'd bog the sketch down so much on the page that you'd be hard pressed to find the comedy in it. But I think, you know, a lot of times that's just sort of, you know, you let your babies go out into the universe and you just hope. Look, it's not just sketch art, it's movies, it's television, you know, that you know, we all know movies that, you know, should have been these hits based on these novels, and you know, the cast is fantastic and the producer has done this and that and the director's done this, and the movie just kind of sits there and you go, why? These are really all talented people. Why isn't it working? And you know, at the end of the day, like I said, it's art. So we just have to, we do the best we can. We take care of our job, right? We do, if we're writing the sketch, we write it as funny as we can, and then we kind of have to let it go and hope for the best.
Well, speaking of letting go, we could go on and on. This has been an amazing session, John. You've been so fantastic. We just scratched the surface. I'm sure we would love to get more. Now, is at crane.sketch your Instagram handle?
Yes, it is. And it's brand new. So I'm still working.
Fantastic. But let's give John a huge round of applause. Thank you. Your generosity of spirit and sharing these gifts with us today. We're happy to bring these sessions to you during our stay-at-home order. and hope that you're getting a lot out of them. I know I certainly did from this one. Debbie Downer gets me every time.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. So with that, goodbye,
All right.
everybody. We'll
Thank
see
you
you
guys
soon.
so
Thank
much.
you, John.
Thank you. Have a
Thank you,
great day.
John.
Stay safe. All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.